Let's continue to this now. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country's war with Hamas was at its highest and vowed to retake control of the enclave's border with Egypt. At a news conference in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu said the southern buffer zone known as the Philadelphi Corridor must be in their hands. He says it must be shut. It is clear that any other arrangement would not ensure the demilitarization that we seek. Netanyahu also did not give more details. Now, to unpack the latest developments and what else is happening in the Gaza Strip, we're now joined from Tel Aviv by our correspondent, Trent Murray. Trent, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, let's unpack what Netanyahu means in his statement, as it relates to the enclave, saying, many saying a move by Israel to take control of the enclave's border with Egypt would be a de facto reversing of its 2005 withdrawal from Gaza and would then place the enclave under exclusive Israeli control. What is the understanding here?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently said that his government has three goals when it comes to its operation in Gaza. The first is to crush Hamas. The second is to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. And the third is to de-radicalize, in his words, the Palestinians that live within Gaza. Now, we know that the IDF operation on the ground, of course, started in the north of Gaza, but it does continue to make its way south, including in the further south city within Gaza, Rafah. And that is there that you have that crucial border crossing between Gaza and Israel. Now, what I think we're getting from Benjamin Netanyahu here is a signal that he intends to effectively move all the way to the very south and to try and take full control of the Strip. But that will, of course, raise some real concerns, especially for UN aid agencies who have been using the Rafah border crossing to get much needed food and water and medicine into the Strip. Israel already does have some kind of control of that by the way that the trucks travel in, but now he's signalling that he's going to continue to move south. And we have heard, actually, Israeli media reporting that he has signalled to Egypt in recent days to move their troops back from their border in an anticipation that there could be fighting on the ground there. He's saying that if any Egyptian soldiers are injured, if they're close to the border, Israel won't take responsibility for it.
Now, I mean, we've seen footage of injured residents at a refugee camp yesterday, and we're hearing, of course, that at least 100 people have been killed, 286 wounded in Israel attacks on homes, in central Gaza in the past 24 hours. Just talk to us about the latest attacks, by Israeli forces and how this is impacting, particularly on the humanitarian crisis.
Well, we've seen more airstrikes just in the past couple of hours in Gaza, including in Khan Yunis and further south in Rafah, and that aligns, I guess you could say, with what Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, which he's not going to take off the pressure here somewhat as they try to fight those Hamas militants on the ground. But we know civilians are being caught in the crossfire, and it is just an escalating humanitarian crisis. We saw very disturbing footage released yesterday by the UN showing thousands of people swarming aid trucks trying to get food and water. The UN says people there are hungry and are desperate. Around 40% of them now are at risk of famine. And there's also been an investigation by the Wall Street Journal revealing 70% of the homes in Gaza have now either been destroyed or severely damaged. And so I think that is why pressure is building on Netanyahu internationally to signal when he's going to move away from this high-intensity warfare to something more targeted in order to try and spare the lives of civilians. The Hamas-run health ministry today says that the death toll is now approaching 22,000 people.
Now, of course, we touched on it a little bit yesterday. There are increased fears, of course, that the war will spread even further throughout the region. A fear that was expressed by, of course, by the US's Anthony Blinken several times. What efforts then are being made to stop this from being a reality, especially by the US? Any word from what is likely to happen in the next couple of days in as far as that is concerned?
Well, look, if we look at what's happening in some of those other arenas today, I mean, there is just no sign that the tensions are subsiding in some of those other flashpoints. I mean, the IDF has released video in the past few hours showing a wave of heavy airstrikes across southern Lebanon. They say they're doing that in response to rocket fire from Hezbollah there, and we've seen large explosions from those IDF fighter jets who effectively penetrate Lebanese airspace and then launch those strikes. And we also saw quite a dramatic incident on the Red Sea overnight with the US Navy saying that 4 small boats launched from Yemen tried to board a container vessel, a Maersk vessel from Denmark. And the US Navy dispatched helicopters and opened fire on those boats, sinking 3 of them and killing those Houthi rebels that were on board. They said one of the final one fled the scene and the ship is still seaworthy, but the shipping company has now said it's going to halt all traffic again there for 48 hours. It only recently started transiting the Red Sea in the past few days, but they're now pausing it again because clearly the risk to them has just not gone away, even with the arrival of those naval assets from the US. So it's with that situation, also Syria, that yes, there are just continued concerns here that the risk of escalation or miscalculation continues to rise given the various arenas now that we're seeing this type of violence.
And just so you know, at the back of what Netanyahu is saying in terms of, the country's war at its highest, I want us to talk about the time that we are at currently. It's the 31st of December. It is New Year's Eve. A number of activists across the globe asking, people to use this time to call for a ceasefire. Just paint a picture for us how it is currently in Gaza at this time of a celebration, one would imagine.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be celebrating in any way there, as you can imagine. As the sun sets on this new year, it feels like a very dark shadow is looming over the one to come. There is just no sign of any let-up from the IDF in its operation, and Hamas on the ground appears to be dug in and is continuing to try and fight back. And so while ever that happens, we will probably continue to see more airstrikes and artillery fire. Potentially one sign of hope, and we have to be very cautious here because it's early days, but we have heard that Egypt sent a delegation to Israel earlier this week to talk to them about their ceasefire proposal. We know Hamas leaders were in Cairo to discuss that. Some outlets are reporting that Hamas has agreed in principle to some of that 3-stage framework to bring this war to an end, and they're awaiting on a response from the Israelis. But Benjamin Netanyahu last night was asked about that, and he said that Hamas is making ultimatums that he will not accept. But he also said there is a possibility of some movement, but he didn't want to raise any exaggerated expectations of an immediate ceasefire anytime soon.
Trent, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and a pleasure speaking to you. And of course, if you can, the little celebration that we have left, I think we've got to take it. So happy New Year to you, or happy New Year's Eve to you. Thank you so much for your time. Trent Murray there, not painting a very good picture in terms of what is currently transpiring in Gaza at the moment. Of course, this as Israel intensifies the war in the Middle East.